The galactic record, written in fractured starlight, states the Curators' iron grip on knowledge shattered not by fleets, but by an impossible choice. A choice made by Lyra'Nai, the Shryke whose delicate appearance belied a mind that danced with chaos, and Marcus Thorne, the unassuming governor infected alongside her. Their destinies irrevocably bound by a spore and judged worthy by an ancient cosmic consciousness. The air in the silent canyons hung thick and ochre, tasting of metallic dust and the faintest, cloying sweetness. Governor Marcus Thorne, his usually neat colonial uniform smudged with red grime, squinted against the dim, twofold suns of Xylos. He was supposed to be overseeing a simple geological survey, a routine check on a newly chartered human colony world. Instead, he found himself in a collapsed cavern, the exit blocked by tons of rock, with an alien. A Shryke. She was unlike any depiction he'd seen in the Federation briefings. Lyra'Nai, as her people were known, was indeed delicate in frame, her movements fluid and graceful even as she assessed their shared prison. What the briefings hadn't prepared him for was her hair. It wasn't hair at all, but a cascade of incredibly fine, opalescent filaments that seemed to drift and sway with an internal current, catching the faint light from their emergency beacons and fracturing it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. They pulsed with a soft, inner luminescence, shifting in hue from purely white to a faint, nervous lavender. He'd read they were sensory organs, but seeing them in person was unsettlingly beautiful. The primary structural supports of this section appear to have been compromised by the recent seismic activity, Governor Thorne. Lyra'Nai stated, her voice a series of melodic, modulated tones that the universal translator in his ear rendered into crisp, formal English. Her posture was ramrod straight, every movement precise, betraying the rigid social hierarchy he knew the Shryke adhered to. Even in a cave-in, etiquette was paramount. Marcus, by contrast, ran a hand through his already disabled brown hair. "No kidding," he muttered, then cleared his throat. "Any luck with your communicator? Mine's just spitting static. Too much rock between us and the surface." His own honesty, often a political liability, made him blunt in crisis. Lyra'Nai's filaments seemed to stiffen almost imperceptibly. "My communication array is also non-functional. Standard emergency protocols dictate we remain calm and await rescue. Attempting to excavate ourselves would be ill-advised." Suddenly, a puff of finer, crimson dust erupted from a fissure near them, accompanied by that same cloying, sweet scent, now stronger. Marcus coughed, waving a hand in front of his face. Lyra'Nai flinched, her filaments flaring briefly to a brighter, almost warning, cyan before settling. "What was that?" Marcus asked, his eyes watering. "Unknown particulate?" Lyra'Nai said, her voice tight. "Potentially a fungal spore release, triggered by the tremor." Even as she spoke, Marcus felt a peculiar wave wash over him, a subtle shift in his perception. The despair he'd begun to feel about their situation, the nagging worry about the colony, his responsibilities, it all seemed to recede, replaced by a startling, almost exhilarating clarity. The blocked exit wasn't an insurmountable problem, it was a challenge. A simple one really, ill-advised. Marcus heard himself say, a confident, almost dismissive tone in his voice that wasn't entirely his own. "Nonsense. We wait, we run out of air. We dig, we get out." Simple. Lyra'Nai turned, her large, dark eyes widening slightly. Her filaments, which had been a pale lavender, now shimmered with an agitated, electric blue. "Governor, your assessment is precipitous. Shryke protocol dictates thorough analysis before action. To act otherwise is a grave offense against structural order." Marcus felt a smirk touch his lips. "Protocol? Lady, protocol just got buried under a few thousand tons of rock. We need to move." He looked at the rockfall. "That section looks weakest. We can pry some of those loose." A strange energy pulsed through him. Indecision, a lifelong companion, had vanished. He felt powerful, unstoppable. He strode towards the rockfall, grabbing a twisted piece of metal debris from the survey equipment. Lyra'Nai watched him, her delicate features uncharacteristically taut. "Your behavior is aberrant, Governor." Then, she swayed. Her hand went to her temple, her filaments flickering erratically. The sweetness, it is persuasive." Her normally precise tones were slurred for a moment. When she straightened, her eyes held a new, unnerving gleam. "You are correct, Governor Thorne. Analysis is a form of delay. The optimal path is direct action. That section is indeed the most viable." Her usually restrained movements became sharp, decisive. She pointed a slender finger, her opalescent nails seeming to catch the light like a shard of glass. The fulcrum point must be here. Apply pressure upwards. I will stabilize the smaller debris. Her voice, though still melodic, now carried an edge of command, a stark contrast to her earlier deference. Marcus felt a surge of approval. Now you're talking. Together, fueled by an unseen, insidious clarity, they began to work. The Doubt-Eater fungus, unknown to them, had taken root, stripping away caution, replacing it with unwavering, perilous confidence. The initial encounter was over. The immediate consequences were just beginning to bloom. As they dislodged the first few boulders, a faint, rhythmic thrumming vibrated through the stone, a sound that wasn't seismic. It was mechanical, and it was getting closer. Lyra'Nai's filaments, now a vibrant, assertive gold, twitched. Governor, I am detecting patterned energy fluctuations. Subterranean, not Zealand native technology. Marcus, high on the fungus-induced certainty, grinned. Reinforcements. Or just more rocks to move. Unclear. Lyra'Nai stated, her head tilted. But the pattern exhibits a distinct signature of information acquisition. A data probe. Before Marcus could process that, a section of the cavern wall further down dissolved into shimmering particles, revealing a dark tunnel and 3 sleek, obsidian drones that hummed with menacing efficiency. At their center floated a holographic emblem, a stylized, unblinking eye. The Curators. Ah, Marcus said, the fungus making him feel strangely unconcerned by the heavily armed drones. Looks like our little cave-in wasn't so private after all. Lyra'Nai's filaments flared to a brilliant, aggressive crimson. Information brokers, she hissed, the term laced with a venom that surprised Marcus. They scavenge, they control, and they will not appreciate unsanctioned access to this cavern system. The lead drone emitted a synthesized voice, cold and devoid of inflection. Biological entities detected. Unregistered. You are in a restricted data zone. Surrender for processing. Marcus hefted the metal bar. Processing? I don't think so. The fungus surged. We just dug ourselves out of one hole. We're not about to jump into another. Lyra'Nai, shedding her delicate facade like a restricting cloak, moved with astonishing speed. Her hand, which had seemed so fragile, lashed out, striking a panel on a piece of fallen survey equipment. It sparked, then erupted in a targeted electromagnetic pulse. One of the drones convulsed and dropped. Impressive, Marcus noted, genuinely surprised by her sudden combat prowess. Her delicate appearance was a masterful deception. Shryke preliminary self-preservation protocols, she stated, her voice crisp and devoid of any hint of her previous adherence to social niceties. The fungus had apparently bulldozed those two. Engage the remaining targets, Governor. Their data capture must be interrupted. The remaining 2 drones opened fire, beams of coherent light scoring the rock around them. Marcus, feeling no fear, only a heightened sense of tactical awareness, ducked and weaved, the metal bar a surprisingly effective shield against the glancing shots. He saw an opening, a vulnerability in the drone's articulated arm. He lunged. Lyra'Nai moved like a phantom, her filaments now a swirling vortex of colors, reacting to the energy discharges, almost seeming to map the chaotic battlefield. She dodged a beam with impossible grace, her hand darting out to rip a crucial component from the second drone. It sputtered and crashed. The last drone focused on her. Shryke anomaly detected. High priority. Subdue. Do not destroy. They know what you are. Marcus grunted, deflecting another blast. Or at least more than I do. Lyra'Nai didn't answer, her attention absolute. Her filaments seemed to spread, to listen to the drone's internal workings. Its targeting matrix predictable. A repeating 3-second cycle. As she spoke, she moved not away from the beam, but into its projected path, then, at the last microsecond, shifted, causing the beam to strike a patch of unstable rock above the drone. A shower of debris rained down, crushing it. Silence, save for their harsh breathing and the crackle of dying machinery. Marcus stared at her. Chaos tamer. That's what the old prospector tales say about some Shryke. Finding order in, well, that. Lyra'Nai's filaments slowly calmed, their color softening to a deep violet. The arrogance of the fungus was still there, but a flicker of something else, perhaps her true intellect, shone through. Randomness is merely unperceived pattern, Governor. The Curators are an infestation, and this world appears to be of particular interest to them. The ground trembled again, more violently this time. Not a cave-in. Something massive was ascending from below. I think we're about to find out why. Marcus said, the fungus-induced confidence making him almost eager. The cavern floor split open with a groan of tortured rock and a blast of superheated air. A colossal crystalline structure rose into the space, pulsing with an internal light that dwarfed their emergency beacons. It was impossibly ancient, its facets covered in glyphs that shimmered and reformed, defying comprehension. It was neither machine nor living thing, but something other. By the stars, Marcus breathed, even the Doubt-Eater fungus unable to completely suppress his awe. Lyra'Nai's filaments flared, not with aggression, but with an intense, analytical curiosity, cycling through a spectrum of colors so rapidly they became a blur of white light. This is not curator technology. It is primordial. A voice echoed, not in their ears, but directly in their minds. It was vast, ancient, and utterly neutral. Entities of Xylos, you have disturbed my slumber. You carry the spore of unmasking. You radiate certainty. Marcus felt a prickle of unease, a tiny shard of his old self piercing the fungal haze. Spore of unmasking. You mean the dust. It strips away the filters of doubt, revealing the core intent. A dangerous catalyst, yet you cooperated. A human, governed by fleeting emotion and fragile logic. A Shryke, bound by rigid structure and ancestral mandate. Lyra'Nai stood straighter if possible. Even with the fungus, some ingrained Shryke formality seemed to surface before this immense presence. We are, survivors, Ancient One. Our cooperation was necessary. Her filaments still pulsed, but now they seemed to be trying to interface, to understand the entity's emanations. Necessity breeds many outcomes: conflict, betrayal, self-preservation above all. The mental voice paused. Yet, in your synergistic destruction of the curator probes, in your shared, unhesitating advance against perceived threat, I detect resonance. A discordant harmony amplified by the spore. A beam of soft, white light emanated from the crystalline entity, enveloping both Marcus and Lyra'Nai. It wasn't hot or cold. It felt analytical, like being seen, truly seen down to their atoms. Marcus felt an urge to speak, to justify their actions, but the fungus-fueled confidence was now tinged with an unfamiliar humility in the face of this entity. He was honest to a fault, and honestly he was out of his depth. Lyra'Nai, however, seemed to find her footing. Ancient One, the Curators seek to control all information, to stifle growth, to impose a sterile order. We acted against that impulse. The fungus made her bold, but her words resonated with a deeper truth he sensed in her. The Curators are a symptom of galactic imbalance. The entity responded. They hoard knowledge, fearing its chaotic potential. You, Shryke, are a chaos tamer. You perceive the symphony within the noise. And you, human, possess an unvarnished core. The spore has merely amplified what was already present. The light intensified for a moment. Your bond, forged in crisis and amplified by the unmasking, is significant. A potential nexus for change, or a catalyst for greater conflagration. The spore will run its course. Its effects will linger, shaping you. What you become is yet unwritten. The ground shuddered. Alarms, faint and distant, began to wail from the surface. The Curators are mobilizing. They detected my awakening when their drones were destroyed. They will seek to contain or co-opt me. And they will certainly seek to acquire you, the spore bearers who have drawn my attention. The crystalline structure began to glow brighter. What are you? Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. I am a steward, a guardian of potential. I do not intervene directly in the squabbles of younger races. But I can adjust the playing field. A section of the cavern wall far from the original cave-in dissolved, revealing a narrow, glowing tunnel. This passage leads to an ancient transit system. It will take you far from Xylos, beyond the Curator's immediate grasp. Whether you use this opportunity to flee, or to confront, is your choice. But know this, your fates are now intertwined. The resonance I detected, it is rare. Nurture it or let it consume you. The light receded. The mental voice softened. The universal blueprint fragments of its sleep within patterns you both now have the potential to perceive, thanks to the spore's unmasking of your latent abilities. Seek it. Understand it. It may be your only shield against what is to come. With a final resonant hum, the colossal crystal began to sink back into the earth, the chasm sealing above it as if it had never been. Marcus and Lyra'Nai were left in the sudden dimness, the emergency beacons casting long dancing shadows. The distant alarms were louder now. Universal blueprint. Marcus echoed, the words feeling momentous. Lyra'Nai's filaments, now a contemplative silver, swayed gently. A theoretical construct containing the foundational principles of all possible technologies. Most consider it a myth. Her eyes, however, held a new depth. The steward did not. The fungus still pulsed within them, urging action, certainty. But now, it was overlaid with something else, a sense of purpose, a destiny handed to them by a cosmic power. So, Marcus said, his voice imbued with a confidence that felt more earned this time. Ancient transit system it is. I assume you have no objections to rapid departure. Shryke protocol notwithstanding. A ghost of a smile, sharp and exhilarating, touched Lyra'Nai's lips. Governor Thorne, under these highly irregular circumstances, I believe Shryke protocol would deem rapid departure optimally efficient. They were forced together, not just by a cave-in, but by a cosmic judgment and the shared threat of the Curators. Their escape from Xylos had begun. The Curator forces would be searching for them, and the Spore, the Doubt-Eater, still sang in their blood, making every decision swift, every action bold, and every risk seem trivial. The ancient transit system was a marvel of forgotten engineering. Not a train or a ship, but a network of shimmering, intangible conduits that pulsed with barely contained energy. Stepping into one felt like dissolving into pure light, then reforming, disoriented but unharmed, in a completely different location. Their first jump took them from the depths of Xylos to a derelict way station orbiting a gas giant, its atmosphere swirling with violet and gold. The station was silent, save for the hum of minimal life support. Dust lay thick on every surface. The steward certainly knows how to pick discrete locations, Marcus observed, wiping a grime-covered console. The fungus made him restless. We need information. Where are we? What resources are here? And most importantly, how do we get further away from those curator bastards? Lyra'Nai's filaments, a focused sapphire blue, swept across the control panels, not touching them, but seeming to absorb information from the dormant systems. This station is pre-Federation. Shryke archives mention such outposts, abandoned during the Great Dispersal. Power cells are depleted, but the primary data core may still be viable if we can reroute auxiliary power. Her confidence was absolute, her movements economical and precise. The delicate Shryke who had entered the caverns was gone, replaced by this formidable intellect and unexpected pragmatist. Marcus found himself watching her, not just for tactical reasons, but with a growing, grudging admiration. The fungus stripped away his usual unassuming nature, replacing it with a directness that bordered on intrusive. You're surprisingly good at this, he said, the words out before he could filter them. The field reports on Shryke focus on your etiquette, your art, your philosophy, not hot wiring ancient space stations. Her filaments stiffened slightly, a flicker of their former lavender, appearing before being suppressed by the dominant blue. Shryke culture values mastery in all chosen paths, Governor. My path before reassignment involved the study of complex energy systems. The principles are universal. Reassignment. The word snagged his attention. I was to be a lore master of the celestial harmonics, she stated, a faint, almost imperceptible wistfulness in her tone, quickly quashed. A position of great honor. However, my unconventional interpretations of certain foundational precepts led to my current diplomatic posting. A polite exile. Marcus, fueled by the fungus's disregard for social niceties, pressed. Unconventional interpretations. Like seeing patterns where others see chaos. Her head tilted, her dark eyes meeting his. Precisely. A trait deemed unsettling by the Shryke High Council. She turned back to the console. Auxiliary power rerouted. Accessing data core. Screens flickered to life, displaying archaic symbols and star charts. Lyra'Nai's filaments danced over them, her mind processing the information at a speed that made Marcus's head spin. We are in the Krell Nebula, she announced. Unclaimed territory. Several dormant trade routes pass nearby. The Curators have a listening post on Krell Alpha, 3 parsecs from here. We must assume they are already analyzing Xylos' sensor logs. So, they know about the Steward, and they know 2 spore-infected individuals got away. Marcus summarized. We're not just fugitives, we're valuable specimens. The fungus made this sound like an exciting challenge rather than a death sentence. Indeed. Lyra'Nai agreed. The spore's effect, the unmasking as the Steward termed it, combined with our unique pairing, would be of immense interest to them, especially if we show any aptitude for deciphering fragments of this universal blueprint. A new tension filled the dusty control room. They weren't just running, they were carrying a potential key to unimaginable power, and a curse that made them reckless. Over the next few days, or what passed for days in the timeless void of space, jumping from one forgotten conduit to another, a strange rhythm developed between them. The Doubt-Eater fungus kept them perpetually on edge, confident, and often dangerously impulsive. They argued, not with animosity, but with a brutal spore-fueled directness, over tactics, destinations, and the interpretation of the cryptic clues the Steward had given them about the universal blueprint. Marcus found Lyra'Nai's rigid adherence to what she called optimal paths infuriating at times, even as he admired her intellect. His own, honest to a fault, nature, amplified by the fungus, meant he never hesitated to call her out when her logic seemed too cold, too detached from the potential humans or Shryke cost. Diverting to the salvage yard on Cygnus X1 is an unnecessary risk, Lyra'Nai declared, her filaments an agitated crimson as they studied a projected star map in the cramped cockpit of a small, barely functional scout ship they'd managed to reactivate on another derelict station. Our primary objective is evasion and the acquisition of untraceable resources. And what if those untraceable resources include a long-range sensor array that can detect Curator patrols before they detect us? Marcus countered, jabbing a finger at the map. Your optimal path has us flying blind half the time. A little calculated risk now saves us from a bigger, uncalculated one later. Calculated risk implies a full understanding of variables. Lyra'Nai snapped, her filaments flaring. The Cygnus X1 yard is frequented by pirates and information peddlers aligned with the Curators. To expose ourselves there is tactically unsound. Breaking Shryke etiquette by raising her voice was a measure of the funguses and the situation's extremity, and hiding in asteroid belts until our power cells die is sound. Marcus shot back, his own voice louder than intended. Suddenly, a shared wave of dizziness washed over them. The confident rage drained away, leaving a hollow, shaky feeling. The fungus, its effects, seemed to ebb and flow, leaving moments of unnerving clarity, of their true selves peeking through. Marcus sagged against the console, rubbing his temples. Gods, this stuff, it makes you want to bite concrete. Lyra'Nai leaned back in her chair, her filaments drooping, their color fading to a dull gray. The intensity is unsustainable. She took a slow, deliberate breath. Your point regarding sensor capabilities has merit, Governor. My assessment may have been overly conservative due to the inherent unpredictability of the Cygnus X1 environment. Marcus looked at her, surprised by the concession. In these brief moments of fungal ebb, glimpses of the Shryke beneath the arrogant certainty appeared. Vulnerable, thoughtful, and my approach, Marcus admitted, his own honesty forcing the words out, was probably too aggressive. We need a middle ground. It was in these moments, these brief respites from the Doubt-Eater's relentless drive, that trust began to form. They saw each other not as the caricatures the fungus made them, but as two individuals in an impossible situation. They found a battered, outdated sensor array at the Cygnus X1 salvage yard, narrowly avoiding a run-in with a Curator informant thanks to Lyra'Nai's sudden, intuitive recognition of a coded phrase in the dockmaster's chatter, a flash of her chaos-taming ability. Marcus, using his unassuming demeanors, when the fungus allowed it, managed to negotiate for fuel cells without raising suspicion. During one long, quiet journey through an uncharted dust cloud, seeking a hidden conduit, Lyra'Nai's filaments began to glow with a soft, inquisitive light. She was studying a complex energy schematic projected from her wrist unit, a fragment of data they believed might relate to the universal blueprint. The patterns, they're like the ancient Shryke star songs, she murmured, more to herself than to Marcus. Infinitely complex, yet underpinned by a fundamental, resonant harmony. The Curators see only the surface chaos. They fear it. Marcus watched her fascinated. Her filaments seemed to almost reach out, to touch the holographic projection, to feel its structure. What do you see? Possibilities? She breathed, her eyes distant. Ways to fold space, to manipulate energy, not with brute force, but with understanding. The universal blueprint isn't a list of inventions, Governor. It's the language of creation itself. He felt a thrill, not born of the fungus, but of genuine wonder. Can you read it? She turned to him, her filaments now a soft, warm gold. Not yet. But I can hear its whispers. The spore, it has amplified my perception of these patterns. It's as if it has unlocked doors in my mind that Shryke tradition has kept sealed for millennia. He saw a vulnerability in her then, a hint of the brilliant mind that had been stifled by her own culture. Maybe unsettling wasn't the right word for your interpretations, he said quietly. Maybe visionary was. A faint flush of lavender touched her filaments. Such pronouncements are highly irregular, Governor. But there was no reprimand in her voice, only a hesitant sort of acknowledgement. The romantic tension was an unspoken current between them, heightened by their forced proximity and the shared danger. It was in the way their hands brushed when reaching for a control, the way their eyes met and held for a heartbeat longer than necessary during a lull in the spore's influence. The unique nature of Lyra'Nai's biology was a constant, subtle presence. Her filaments, so expressive, became a barometer of her inner state that Marcus found himself increasingly attuned to. He learned that vibrant crimson meant focused anger or intense concentration, sapphire blue was analytical thought, soft gold was wonder or dawning understanding, and a pale, shimmering lavender hinted at unease or a rare moment of introspection. One cycle, while hiding in the shadow of a rogue moon, their ship powered down to avoid detection by a passing Curator patrol, the cold of the void began to seep into the small cabin. Marcus shivered, despite the environmental controls. Lyra'Nai noticed. Without a word, her filaments, which had been a cautious dark gray, began to glow with a soft, warm amber light. They seemed to expand slightly, creating a faint, radiant aura around her. The temperature in her immediate vicinity rose noticeably. Marcus stared. Your filaments. They're generating heat. A minor biological function, she said, her gaze fixed on the sensor readings of the departing patrol. Shryke physiology is adaptable to extreme environments. Energy conservation and redistribution. But it felt like more than that. It felt protective. He moved a little closer, drawn by the warmth and the unexpected gesture. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. Her filaments pulsed, the amber deepening. It is a logical allocation of resources to ensure crew survivability. But her eyes, when they briefly met his, held something other than logic. A flicker of connection, of shared humanity, or perhaps Shrykeanity that transcended the spore and the danger. In that moment, huddled in the cold darkness, warmed by the gentle glow of her alien biology, the first, fragile tendrils of love began to take root, unexpected and perilous. They were still infected, still prone to bouts of arrogance and reckless action. But beneath the surface, Marcus Thorne, the honest governor, and Lyra'Nai, the chaos-taming Shryke, were starting to find not just cooperation, but a profound, unsettling, and undeniably powerful connection. The universal blueprint might be their shield, but their bond was becoming their anchor. The Krell Nebula, a vast expanse of cosmic dust and newborn stars, became their temporary sanctuary and their proving ground. The information they'd gleaned about the universal blueprint was fragmentary, like shattered pieces of a divine mosaic. Lyra'Nai, with her burgeoning chaos-taming abilities, amplified by the Doubt-Eater fungus, would spend hours, sometimes days, immersed in the complex data streams they managed to decrypt from ancient Shryke archives or salvage from forgotten data caches. Her filaments would pulse with intense concentration, a kaleidoscope of colors reflecting her mental state as she wrestled with concepts that made Marcus's head ache. It's not just technology, she explained one cycle, her voice filled with a frustrated awe, her filaments a vibrant, electric blue shot through with sparks of crimson. It's about the fundamental interplay of energy and matter, consciousness and causality. The Curators want to codify it to reduce it to a set of safe, predictable equations. But it's inherently alive. It resists stagnation. Marcus, watching her, felt a surge of something protective. The fungus still made him bold, but his honesty now compelled him to voice the admiration he felt. You see things no one else can, Lyra'Nai. Things that scare entire civilizations. Her filaments softened to a deep violet. The spore allows me to bypass the ingrained Shryke fear of uncontrolled variables. It makes me fearless in the face of infinite complexity. But it also blinds me to subtle dangers. To the nuances you often perceive, Governor. This was their new dynamic. The fungus gave Lyra'Nai unparalleled focus and intellectual daring, while Marcus, his unassuming nature now a strange counterpoint to his spore-induced bluntness, often acted as her spotter, his innate honesty forcing him to point out the ethical pitfalls or unforeseen consequences of her more radical interpretations of the blueprint. Their pursuit by the Curators was relentless. The information brokers had a galaxy-spanning network and news of two spore-infected fugitives who had communed with the Xylos Steward and possessed knowledge of the universal blueprint had clearly reached the highest echelons. Probes and patrol ships became more frequent, their search patterns more sophisticated. One encounter was particularly close. They were navigating a dense asteroid field, hoping to use its sensor-baffling properties to mask their trail, when three Curator interceptors, sleek and menacing, decloaked directly in their path. Evasive maneuvers, Marcus yelled, the fungus flooding him with adrenaline and tactical certainty. He threw their small scout ship, the Wanderer, into a gut-wrenching spin. Lyra'Nai's hands flew across her console, her filaments blazing crimson. Their targeting solutions are adapting too quickly. They have a new predictive algorithm. Then let's give them something unpredictable. Marcus snarled, angling the ship directly towards a massive, tumbling asteroid. Governor, that is statistically an unacceptably high-risk collision course. Lyra'Nai protested, but even as she spoke, her filaments were already analyzing the asteroid's rotation, the debris field around it, the subtle gravitational eddies. Trust me? Marcus grunted, his knuckles white on the controls. At the last possible second, as Lyra'Nai shouted, Port thrusters, full burn. Vector 79 Alpha, he complied, threading the ship through a fissure in the asteroid that seemed impossibly narrow. The interceptors, following their predictive models, were caught off guard. One clipped the asteroid, spiraling away damaged. The other two hesitated, recalculating. Their command structure is momentarily disrupted. Lyra'Nai observed, her filaments now a sharp, analytical sapphire. The lead ship's comms are spiking. They're reporting an anomaly in our flight pattern. Good? Marcus said, a grim satisfaction on his face. Let them think we're crazy. It's half true, thanks to our little fungal friends. The intensity of the chase, the constant threat of capture or death, stripped away the last vestiges of formality between them. They relied on each other implicitly. His piloting skills, augmented by the fungus's fearlessness, and her ability to see patterns in the chaos of battle, to predict enemy moves or find impossible escape routes, made them a surprisingly effective team. The stakes escalated when they intercepted a coded Curator transmission. It wasn't meant for their ears, but Lyra'Nai's growing mastery over information systems, another facet of her chaos taming, allowed her to pluck it from the ether. The message was chilling. It spoke of the Xylos aberrations, them and the potential genetic instability of any offspring resulting from their interspecies union, especially given their spore-altered biology. It outlined contingency protocol Cyan, which mandated the immediate confiscation or education of any such child to ensure genetic purity and informational integrity within the Curator dominion. Marcus listened, his face hardening, the fungus-induced confidence momentarily replaced by a cold, primal fury. They want to take our child. If we had one. Lyra'Nai's filaments turned to stark, icy white, a color he'd never seen before. It radiated a silent, terrifying rage. They seek to control not just information but life itself. To dictate its course, its diversity. This is an abomination against the very principles of existence the universal blueprint describes. The abstract threat of the Curators had become deeply, terrifyingly personal. The genetic purity law wasn't just a political doctrine, it was a dagger pointed at a future they hadn't even dared to fully imagine yet. That night, after they'd found temporary refuge in the hollowed-out moon of a dead planet, the weight of the Curator decree hung heavy in the small cabin. The fungus's influence was at a low ebb, leaving them both raw and vulnerable. Marcus found Lyra'Nai staring out at the star-dusted void, her filaments a soft, melancholic silver, drifting like seaweed in a slow current. A child, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Shryke tradition dictates pairings are carefully considered, based on lineage, societal contribution, harmonic resonance. And human tradition is a bit more chaotic. Marcus said gently, moving to stand beside her. Love, attraction, sometimes just dumb luck. She turned to him, her large eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't quite name. The spore, it has accelerated so much between us, Governor. Fear, trust, understanding, attraction. His breath caught. The fungus might strip away indecision, but it couldn't fabricate the genuine emotion he felt for this extraordinary, brilliant, and fiercely beautiful alien. Marcus. He corrected her softly. My name is Marcus. And yes, Lyra'Nai, attraction. Her filaments shimmered, a wave of rose and gold light rippling through them. The Curator's decree, it forces a contemplation I was not prepared for. Mint neither, he admitted, his voice husky. But Lyra'Nai, if that future, the one they want to steal, if it's something you could ever want, I would fight all the Curators in the galaxy for it. For you. His honesty, raw and unfiltered, hung in the air. She reached out a slender hand, her fingers hesitating just before touching his arm. Her filaments, however, were less reserved. One iridescent strand, glowing with a soft, warm pink, extended and brushed against his cheek. The touch was electric. Not a shock, but a wave of sensation of understanding. He felt a flicker of her emotions, her fear, her resolve, her own burgeoning affection. It was more intimate than any physical touch he'd ever known. "Marcus," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Shryke physiology. Our filaments are not merely sensory. They are an extension of our consciousness, our emotional core. To share their touch in this manner, it is a profound gesture of trust. Of connection." He covered her hand with his own, his gaze locked on hers. "I trust you, Lyra'Nai. More than I've ever trusted anyone." The fungus had brought them together through shared crisis and amplified confidence. But this moment, this quiet confession in the heart of a dead moon, was entirely their own. It was a choice, a step taken not in reckless abandon, but with a clear-eyed understanding of the risks and the immense, terrifying, beautiful potential of what lay between them. He leaned in, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Her filaments pulsed with a soft, inviting light brushing against his face, his neck, sending shivers of sensation and pure emotion through him. It was like being enveloped in a warm, sentient nebula. When their lips met, it was gentle at first, then deepened with all the pent-up emotion, the fear, the defiance, the desperate hope that had been building between them. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a declaration. Against the Curators, against the odds, against the vast, indifferent galaxy. Their bond, judged worthy by an ancient cosmic entity, was now sealed by their own hearts. The fight for their love, and for the potential of a new life the galaxy deemed an aberration, had truly begun. The universal blueprint was their map, but their connection was their compass, guiding them toward an uncertain but shared destiny. They had faced down external threats, and now, with this profound intimacy, they had acknowledged the truth of their feelings, a truth the Doubt-Eater fungus, for all its arrogance, could not create, only reveal. The acknowledgement of their feelings, solidified by that profound connection in the dead moon's shadow, changed everything and nothing. They were still fugitives, still infected, still hunted. But now a fierce, protective love fueled their fight, adding a desperate edge to their already potent, fungus-enhanced resolve. The universal blueprint was no longer just a means of survival or a weapon against the Curators. It was the key to securing a future for themselves, perhaps even for a child the galaxy would condemn. Lyra'Nai's engagement with the blueprint's fragments became even more intense. Her chaos-taming abilities, sharpened by the spore, and now driven by this deeper purpose, began to yield astonishing results. She didn't just see patterns, she started to manipulate them, to intuitively understand how to weave strands of energy and information into novel forms. "Marcus, look," she'd say, her filaments a blazing tapestry of invention, as a holographic projection showed a new type of shield emitter derived from blueprint principles, one that didn't just block energy, but harmonically neutralized it, or a communication system that could piggyback on hyperdimensional resonances, making it virtually untraceable. His role evolved too. While Lyra'Nai was the genius, Marcus, with his unassuming honesty, became their moral compass and their anchor to pragmatism. The fungus still made him bold, but his core integrity ensured their growing power was never wielded carelessly. "That's incredible, Lyra'Nai," he'd say, studying a schematic for a weapon that could unravel molecular bonds. "But what are the safeguards? What if it falls into the wrong hands? What if we become the wrong hands under the spore's influence?" These questions, born of his innate character, forced them to build ethical frameworks around the blueprint's terrifying potential, even as the fungus urged them towards ruthless efficiency. Their deepening romantic connection expressed itself in ways unique to their pairing. Lyra'Nai's filaments became an extension of their intimacy. In moments of quiet, she would let them drift around him, sharing her thoughts and emotions in subtle waves of color and sensation. A soft, warm gold for affection, a shimmering emerald for shared humor, a deep, comforting blue when he was troubled. For Marcus, it was like learning a new language, one spoken not with words, but with light and feeling. He, in turn, offered her the unwavering rock of his presence, his honest affection a grounding force against the spore's disorienting certainties and her own culture's ingrained reticence. The Curators, however, were not idle. Their pursuit intensified, led by a particularly ruthless agent known only as Inquisitor Valerius. Valerius wasn't just an information broker, he was a zealot, a true believer in the Curators' dogma of genetic purity and controlled knowledge. He saw Marcus and Lyra'Nai not as mere fugitives, but as ideological contaminants. Through intercepted communications, they learned Valerius was systematically closing off their escape routes, using his vast network to predict their movements with unnerving accuracy. He was also spreading propaganda, painting them as dangerous, spore-crazed anarchists who threatened galactic stability with their pursuit of the forbidden universal blueprint. He's hurting us, Marcus realized, studying a star chart where Curator picket lines were tightening like a noose. He's not just trying to catch us, he's trying to force us into a specific sector. Lyra'Nai's filaments, a tense, analytical silver, trace the projected lines of Valerius' strategy. This sector, Sector 734, it is sparsely populated, but contains one significant asset, the planet Viridian. It is currently undergoing realignment by a Curator world forge. Marcus felt a chill. A world forge. A mobile planet cracker, a colossal war factory capable of stripping a world of its resources, its life, its very memory, all to fit the Curator's sterile vision of order. He's planning to make an example of us, Lyra'Nai stated, her voice grim. To capture us against the backdrop of a world being unmade, to demonstrate the futility of resisting Curator dominion. The fungus in their veins screamed for direct confrontation, for a glorious, defiant stand. But the love that now bound them, the nascent hope for a future, urged a different kind of courage. We can't fight a world forge in Valerius's fleet head-on, Marcus said, his honesty forcing him to acknowledge their limitations, even as the spore chafed at the admission. Not yet. Lyra'Nai's filaments pulsed, a complex pattern of deep blues and strategic crimsons. No. But the universal blueprint, it speaks of resonance, of finding the critical point in any system. A world forge, for all its power, is still a system. A complex, chaotic one. And I am a chaos tamer. A daring, desperate plan began to form. They wouldn't meet Valerius on his terms. They would go to Viridian, but not to be captured. They would go to strike a blow, not just for their own survival, but for all the worlds threatened by the Curator's iron fist. Their journey towards Viridian was a blur of calculated risks and narrow escapes. They used every trick Lyra'Nai had coaxed from the blueprint, cloaking systems that bent light in impossible ways, short-burst FTL jumps through uncharted hyperlanes, communication scramblers that turned Curator intercepts into gibberish. Marcus piloted the Wanderer with a skill born of desperation and fungus-fueled audacity, his unassuming appearance a constant surprise to the few border patrols or opportunistic pirates they encountered and had to outwit. During one particularly tense passage through a monitored shipping lane, hiding in the sensor shadow of a massive freighter, Lyra'Nai's filaments suddenly flared with alarm, a sharp, piercing yellow. Curator deep scan probe. It's using a tachyon pulse. It will penetrate our cloaking. There was no time to run, no time to hide. Marcus looked at Lyra'Nai. Her face was set, her eyes burning with intensity. There is one possibility, she said, her voice tight. A blueprint fragment, a way to create a localized null information field. But it requires perfect energy synchronization, and it's never been tested. No time like the present, Marcus said, his hand instinctively finding hers. The spore made him certain they could do it. Their love made him certain they had to. Channel auxiliary power through the primary emitter array. Lyra'Nai instructed, her filaments a whirlwind of focused energy, interfacing directly with the ship's systems. I will modulate the frequency. When I give the signal, you must match my energy signature with the engine's gravitic output. Precisely. It was an insane gamble. One miscalculation, and they could overload their systems or worse, create a feedback loop that would tear the ship apart. The probe's distinctive ping echoed through the cabin. No, Marcus. Now. He pushed the engines not with mechanical precision, but with an intuitive feel for the ship, for the energy Lyra'Nai was wrestling into shape. Her filaments pulsed in time with the thrumming of the engines, a visible manifestation of their symbiotic effort. For a breathtaking moment, the Wanderer was enveloped in a shimmering bubble of pure, informationless static. The Curator probe swept past them. Its sensors expecting data found only void. The bubble collapsed. The ship shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed. Status. Marcus gasped, his heart hammering. Lyra'Nai slumped back, her filaments dimming to a wary gray, but a triumphant smile touched her lips. Field maintained for 3.7 standard seconds. Sufficient. They registered nothing. They had done it. Together. They were more than just two individuals. They were a functioning unit. Their abilities, their minds, their very life energies amplified by their bond and the strange catalyst of the spore. As they neared Viridian, the grim reality of the Curators' power became starkly visible. The planet, once presumably green and vibrant, was shrouded in a sickly brown haze. Orbiting it like a monstrous vulture was the World Forge, a behemoth of dark metal and glowing energy conduits, its surface bristling with excavation beams and disassembly arrays that clawed at the planet's surface. Smaller Curator warships patrolled around it like jackals. Gods, Marcus breathed, the sight sickening him. They're not just mining it, they're erasing it. Lyra'Nai's filaments were a cold, hard silver. This is the order Valyria seeks to impose. A galaxy cleansed of imperfection, of uncontrolled variables. Viridian is his message. Then we need to send one of our own, Marcus said, his voice quiet but filled with a steely resolve. The fungus urged action, but his heart, now fiercely protective of Lyra'Nai and the future she represented, demanded that action be meaningful. Their plan was audacious: infiltrate the World Forge. Not to destroy it, that was beyond their capabilities, but to find its central data core, the nexus of its operations. Lyra'Nai believed that if she could interface with it, she could introduce a specific, blueprint-derived counter-resonance, a chaotic signal that wouldn't destroy the Forge, but would cripple its more destructive systems, buying Viridian time, and more importantly, broadcasting the Forge's vulnerability to the galaxy, a testament that the Curators were not invincible. It was a suicide mission. But as they looked at each other, the shared certainty of the spore was overlaid with a deeper, more profound agreement. This was a fight they had to make. For Viridian. For themselves. For the hope of a galaxy where love and new life weren't condemned as aberrations. Their rising action was complete. The climax awaited them in the mechanical heart of the planet Cracker. The approach to the World Forge, designated Crucible Station by the Curators, was a masterclass in stealth and audacity. Lyra'Nai, using her intuitive grasp of the blueprint, had devised a way to modulate the Wanderer's energy signature to mimic that of a piece of drifting Viridian debris, fooling the Forge's outer sensor grid. Marcus piloted them through a terrifying ballad of wreckage and active mining beams. His fungus-amped reflexes pushed to their absolute limit. Docking clamps engaged. Lyra'Nai murmured, her filaments a tense, flickering silver, as they latched onto an unlit maintenance gantry on the Forge's colossal underbelly. Internal atmospheric pressure is unpleasant but breathable. Minimal life signs in this sector. Mostly automated. Just how we like it, Marcus said, checking the charge on his pulse pistol. He wore a scavenged dark gray utility suit, his unassuming features now set in grim determination. Lyra'Nai, similarly clad, her filaments tucked beneath a close-fitting cowl to dampen their telltale glow, looked like a shadow. They moved through the metallic guts of the World Forge like ghosts. The scale was overwhelming, corridors wide enough to drive transports through, cavernous chambers, filled with deafening machinery processing Viridian's stolen resources. The air thrummed with power, and with a palpable sense of relentless, methodical destruction. Lyra'Nai was their guide, her chaos-taming senses alive to the Forge's intricate workings. Her filaments, even beneath the cowl, seemed to twitch and pulse, tasting the energy flows, deciphering the machine language of the station. The central data core is 3 levels down, heavily shielded. She whispered into their comm link, her voice tight with concentration. But there's a primary conduit junction nearby. If I can tap into it, I can create a localized feedback loop that will temporarily disable internal surveillance in this quadrant. Marcus nodded, covering her while she worked at a complex interface panel, her slender fingers dancing over arcane controls. The fungus in his blood made him hyper-aware, every shadow a potential threat, every distant clang of machinery a possible patrol. But his overriding concern was for Lyra'Nai. If anything happened to her, sparks flew from the panel. Lyra'Nai hissed, pulling her hand back. Their security protocols are robust and adaptive. Try it this way, Marcus suggested, his honest pragmatism cutting through the complexity. He pointed to a schematic she had displayed on her wrist unit. Instead of trying to override the primary lock, what if we trigger a cascade failure in a secondary system? Create a diversion for its AI. Lyra'Nai's hidden filaments seemed to pulse with renewed interest. A chaotic interruption, yes. Divert its processing power. Governor Thorne, your ability to find simple elegance in complex problems is consistently surprising. A hint of warmth in her voice even now. It worked. Alarms blared in a distant sector. Red lights flashed, but their immediate area went dark silent. Surveillance offline for approximately 12 minutes. Lyra'Nai confirmed, "We must move." Quickly, they descended deeper into the forge, encountering automated defense turrets and maintenance drones. Marcus's straightforward combat skills, honed by countless frontier skirmishes and amplified by the Spore's confident aggression, dealt with the drones. Lyra'Nai, with her preternatural understanding of systems, disabled the turrets, sometimes by simply touching them, her filaments finding a resonant frequency that scrambled their targeting. Finally, they reached a massive, reinforced blast door. The data core. Lyra'Nai breathed, her hand resting on the cold metal. Inquisitor Valerius will be here. He would not delegate the oversight of a World Forge's core operations. Good, Marcus said, his voice a low growl. I've been wanting a word with him. The fungus made him eager for the confrontation. His love for Lyra'Nai made him determined to end Valerius's threat. The doors hissed open, not by their hand, but from within. The chamber beyond was vast, cylindrical, the walls lined with pulsating conduits and holographic displays showing the slow, agonizing deconstruction of Viridian. At the center, on a raised platform, stood Inquisitor Valerius. He was tall, ascetic, his face a mask of cold certainty. Flanking him were two heavily armed Curator enforcers. Governor Marcus Thorne. Shryke anomaly Lyra'Nai. Valerius's voice was amplified, emotionless. Your arrival was anticipated. The Spore makes you predictable in your boldness. And your dogma makes you predictable in your cruelty, Valerius. Marcus retorted, stepping forward, pistol raised. Cruelty. Valerius almost sounded surprised. We'll bring order, Governor. We excise the galaxy's imperfections. Your illicit union, the potential for a genetically unstable hybrid offspring, your pursuit of the chaotic universal blueprint. You are the embodiment of imperfection. Lyra'Nai stepped beside Marcus, her cowl now pushed back, her filaments blazing a defiant, brilliant crimson. The universe thrives on diversity, Inquisitor, not sterile uniformity. The blueprint is not chaos, it is the song of creation. You are just too deaf to hear it. Eloquent. Shryke. Valerius sneered, but ultimately irrelevant. You will be neutralized. Your dangerous knowledge will be contained, and Protocol Cyan will ensure any issue of your union is properly integrated. The enforcers raised their weapons. Not today, Valerius, Marcus said. The fight was brutal, fast, and desperate. Marcus engaged the enforcers, his unassuming build belying the speed and ferocity the Spore granted him. He moved with an honest, direct economy of motion, each shot precise, each blow calculated. He took a searing energy blast to his shoulder, but kept fighting. The pain a distant roar drowned out by the fungus, and his determination. Lyra'Nai faced Valerius. It wasn't a physical battle, but a contest of wills, of ideologies made manifest. Valerius unleashed waves of disruptive informational energy from his gauntlet, designed to overwhelm and subdue. But Lyra'Nai stood her ground, her filaments a swirling vortex of light, absorbing, analyzing, and redirecting the attacks. She was truly a chaos tamer, finding the patterns in his assault, turning his own weaponized information against him. You cannot win, Shryke, Valerius snarled, redoubling his efforts. Order will always prevail. Order without life is entropy, Inquisitor. Lyra'Nai cried out, her voice ringing with power. Her filaments flared and a pulse of pure, coherent understanding, a fragment of the blueprint's harmony shot from her, striking Valerius's console. The Inquisitor staggered back as his systems overloaded, alarms shrieking. What have you done? Marcus, having finally downed the last enforcer with a desperate, close-quarters move, saw his chance. He lunged for the Forge's primary control interface, the one Lyra'Nai needed to access. Valerius, recovering, fired a desperate shot at Marcus. Lyra'Nai cried out, Marcus? Time seemed to slow. Marcus saw the blast coming, knew he couldn't dodge. But then Lyra'Nai was there, a blur of motion, her filaments lashing out like whips of light, intercepting the blast, absorbing its energy with a sound like shattering crystal. She crumpled, her light dimming. Lyra'Nai! Marcus roared, a wave of terror momentarily eclipsing the Spore's influence. Valerius advanced on her. Your sentimentality is your weakness, Shryke. But as he raised his weapon for the final blow, Lyra'Nai looked up, her eyes blazing, her filaments, though weakened, pulsing with a defiant, chaotic energy. No, Inquisitor, she whispered, her hand reaching out to the main console Marcus had cleared. It is my strength. Her touch was like a spark in a powder keg. The data core, already destabilized by her earlier assault, now met the full, focused intent of a chaos tamer empowered by love and the universal blueprint. The entire world forge shuddered violently. Systems across the vast station began to fail, not exploding, but simply unraveling. The excavation beams guttering out, the disassembly arrays freezing mid-motion. The holographic displays of Viridian's destruction flickered and died. Valerius stared in horror as his monument to order dissolved into chaos. Impossible! This is anarchy! No, Inquisitor, Marcus said, rushing to Lyra'Nai's side, helping her up. This is a consequence. The World Forge was dying, not with a bang, but with a whimper, its intricate systems falling silent as Lyra'Nai's counter-resonance spread. Outside, Viridian, bruised and battered, was suddenly, blessedly, free from its tormentor. We need to go, Marcus urged, supporting Lyra'Nai, whose filaments were slowly regaining some of their luster. This place is coming apart. Valerius, his face a mask of disbelief and fury, tried to stop them, but the failing systems of the forge trapped him, emergency bulkheads slamming down, power conduits shorting out around him. His cries of outrage were lost in the cacophony of the dying station. They fought their way back to the Wanderer, through collapsing corridors and panicking low-level Curator drones, the World Forge groaning around them like a dying beast. As they blasted away from the crippled station, they saw Curator warships in disarray, their command structure shattered by the Forge's